The topic of psychology in general is ambiguous and fluid and nuanced and open to interpretation, but there are some fundamental principles that I think apply to the shadow. Carl Jung, the father of modern analytical psychology, coined the term shadow work. In this dream session tonight, I want to explore the shadows of the psyche to talk about exactly what they are, how we can identify them, and I want to give some actionable steps and some real-world examples. Everyone has darker aspects of themselves that they repress, that they don't acknowledge, and in refusing to accept that, you feed that shadow. The shadow is fed from ignorance. Jung explained it as trying to suppress the darker aspects of your personality, these things that pop into your mind that you think they might make you a bad person, so you choose to ignore them. They don't actually go away. They'll always be with you. The only way to live with them productively is to find a way to integrate them, not to suppress them or ignore them. Some people I know, when they hear the term shadow work, they think it's almost like doing some dark spells or something. Shadow work is not dogmatic in that sense. There's no religion, there's no cult-like following. Shadow work is really just a psychological journey that humans take to explore their own psyche. And there are actionable steps you can take to learn how to integrate your shadow. It's not something that you can do overnight and then you'll be cured for the rest of your life. Shadow work is just the acknowledgement and the integration of your darker, repressed personality, and it's a lifelong process. It's not something that just happens overnight. You can learn to integrate shadows and live with them, but there will always be more that you'll be adding to that. What makes up the shadow self? Just like we have our personal consciousness, our personal unconscious, and then there's the collective unconscious, there's a personal shadow. There's shadows that we deal with personally on a day-to-day basis, and then there's cultural shadows that are more broad and widely formed by larger bodies of intellect and intention in our society. The shadow is described usually as darker aspects that we reject, whether it's our desire for independence can be seen as a dark thing, and obviously our aggression and our sexual desires. And we don't own these shadows. They're not exclusively a personal part of us. They're a part of the collective unconscious that we all share. In the same sense that a shadow that's cast on the ground, it's essentially the same thing as the darkness that's out there in space, the emptiness. It is the lack of light. So yes, your shadow is your shadow, but it's not a phenomena that's exclusive to you. You can't escape your shadow. The only way to escape a shadow is to either to be completely encompassed in ultimate darkness, or to make an individual shadow go away, you just have to shine a light on it. That would be to acknowledge it. Then it's not a shadow anymore. It's not some mysterious term that people use. It really applies metaphorically on every level in every way. But I have to mention the laws of science that apply here. The scientific law of conservation. Energy can never be created or destroyed. The law of transmutation. Energy is never solid. It's always in motion, and it's always changing form. Energy always changes from one form to another. It can't be created or destroyed. Those are important principles to realize. These sensations, these thoughts, and these ideas that we have that apply to the shadow self, these instinctual principles that pop up in our mind, they have their own energy. Everything has a measurable energy. It's not the lack of energy. This shadow, it's fed from these ideas and these thoughts that we have. So the point of the scientific law of conservation, that energy can never be created or destroyed. It only transmutates. It only changes form. So when you're ignoring the shadow aspects, when you're ignoring these thoughts that you have that are not culturally accepted, you're not making them go away. They can't be destroyed. They will only change form. And that's when the shadow can get really dark and can show itself and can spill out in these negative ways, these extreme ways. It's the perfect classical example of the office guy who gets bullied and pushed around a lot in his office, and then he comes back and shoots up the office, you know. That's because the shadow has been built up so much. But the shadows are not inherently negative, and that's important to understand, because just like a plant needs light to grow and we need light to grow, too much light will also kill a plant. All living things need a balance of light and dark. If we all get too much sun, we know that can be detrimental. So darkness, shadows are necessary. They're a fundamental, necessary aspect of our reality. So you can't escape these shadows. That's the entire point here, and I think that's what most people struggle with, is that they have these ideas and these thoughts and these sensations, and they think they need to separate from them because they don't want it to become part of their identity. One aspect of the human psyche that Carl Jung talks about often is the persona. Our persona is what we choose to show to people. It's the social mask we put on. It's the psychological mask. It's all the things that we want people to think about us and believe about us and notice about us. It's how we portray ourselves to the world. All those things that you keep inside and you never bring them out to show them to the world, everything that you don't acknowledge, those are what make up your shadow self. From a young age, a lot of us are kind of trained and coaxed away from this shadow. We're taught to not acknowledge it. And that could be good. You know, it's good to teach a child that they can't just have an outrage every time they don't get their way. It's good to teach a child that they can't just say what they think every time they think it. Sometimes there's some things that don't need to be said. The issue with that is that a lot of times these kids, they don't learn healthy ways to integrate those aspects of themselves. Say there's a young girl, and when she's a little girl running around, she just automatically speaks her mind. You know, she'll walk up to the neighbor lady and tell her, you know, like, why is your butt so big, you know? Or like, we all know how kids can be brutally honest in that sense, and it's innocent and it's cute. But a lot of times people will teach their child not to say those things and not to do those things, but then they don't tell them and they don't teach them that there is a time and a place and a healthy way to acknowledge these things. If you want to do stand-up comedy, or, you know, in casual conversation with your friends, there will be times when you can just speak your mind freely and you can say the first thing that comes to mind, and it's okay and it will be accepted. A lot of people, they don't teach their kids that. They only teach them what not to say and when not to say it. They don't teach them what to say and when to say it. So that will build up their shadow self. And for that little girl, as an example, if her parents are always teaching her, well, don't argue back, don't question, because I said so, that we don't need any further conversation in this aspect, that girl may grow up with the inclination to not want to speak her mind and not want to stand up for herself, because her parents tried to teach her that and they were thinking they were doing the right thing, but they don't realize that later on that can manifest as her being completely manipulated at school, or at her job. She might not have the confidence to be able to ask for a raise, or she might not have the confidence to speak up to a manager when they're treating her wrong, because her parents were taught that only leads to conflict. Young boys with their rage, generally, like, boys especially, I know, like, there's been tests and studies done on this, like 2-year-old boys are the most violent human beings on the planet. Statistically, you get a group of 1,000 2-year-olds and then 1,000 of every other age group. The 2-year-olds will have the most biting and punching and kicking and screaming. These boys are exploring their shadows. They're just becoming aware of those certain aspects of their shadow. Generally, they're taught you don't do that. You don't hit, you don't punch, you don't kick, you don't scream, ever. And then a lot of boys, they struggle finding ways to express that aggression, that natural aggression. I mean, aggression is necessary, and sometimes extreme aggression is necessary. And that's why the shadow is a necessary aspect of ourselves. We can't escape it, and we need it, and we need to learn how to work with it. The shadow comes into play when the conscious mind doesn't have the capacity or the time to evaluate the situation that it's in. That's when the instinctual shadow comes out. Then it gets that fight or flight instinct. And if there's no flight available, then that cat's going to fight. And that's where the shadow comes in. And as all beings, we're all put in situations where we have to choose a strong, forceful way to push through something. If we're taught that aggression is always a bad thing and that there's always negative repercussions to that aggression, and we're always trying to suppress it, then when it is necessary, we won't understand how to use it. We won't be familiar with it enough to use it effectively. So it's important to teach kids growing up and just to talk to your friends and the people around you about ways to integrate these shadows, these darker aspects of yourself. I know me personally, like one thing I realized was that at a very young age, I was writing poetry. That was one way of me integrating my shadow, and we're going to talk more about the anima and the animus in a few minutes here, but like my music, that turned into me writing lyrics. And generally for young men, if they're writing songs or they're writing poetry, sister, you said you don't feel aggressive generally. Yes, and females are generally less aggressive than males. But you do feel aggressive sometimes, and it's good to find healthy ways to express that aggression. Now, everyone's different. There is no one perfect way for someone to approach and integrate their shadow that you can apply to everyone across the board. Everyone has their own ways. And I want to talk about some of those ways, because what's the point of discussing these if we don't come up with actionable steps that we can take? I think it's really important. Otherwise, I might be up here, it might seem like I'm just talking about a bunch of obscure psychological metaphysics, when really these are just life strategies, daily strategies that we all have to live through. And there are ways to work through them, for example, for young men, or for anyone in general. How do we release this aggression? A great way is through exercise. Exercise, and obviously sports. Sports is a healthy way to integrate that aggression and that power that we all feel inside of us that sometimes we want to bring out. But it doesn't only have to be sports, and it doesn't only have to be exercise. Those are obviously great ways of doing it. For me, for the most part, I like to exercise, and I feel like that does help. But yeah, even hitting the punching bag, but other than that, writing my music was a great way for me to integrate my shadow. I could acknowledge a lot of this anger that I have, and I could bring it out artistically and creatively and proactively instead of in destructive ways. Instead of going out and cursing out people and getting in arguments and getting in fistfights all the time, you can turn that to the page. And that's what I chose to do. And I really believe that a lot of the greatest artists, and especially a lot of the greatest lyricists and musicians, and I think most of us understand that a lot of the greatest art and music has come from the darker aspects of someone's personality. There is no hero without a struggle. And this is why the shadow aspects are so important in life. And also, love songs are very prominent in music, but also breakup songs. You said art always calms you down. Yeah. Art is a great way to integrate that shadow. And then, so for someone who doesn't make music, who doesn't write lyrics like me, and for someone that doesn't want to work out, what are other ways that people can find healthy ways to integrate the shadow? And I realized, and I was just thinking about this earlier today, it came to my mind that it's not just making music for me. That wasn't the only way for me to integrate my shadow. Listening to music, just enjoying music and being engulfed in music is a great way to integrate your shadow. Because, shadow integration is all about, it starts with acknowledgement, like I said in the beginning there. First, you have to recognize that you have these shadows, and these shadows exist. And if you ignore them, they'll only grow more powerful. The only way to release them, or you can't release them, you integrate them in healthy ways, is to acknowledge them, is to recognize them, and meditate on them. Don't dwell on them. There's a difference. Once you meditate on them and you learn to integrate them, you don't have to dwell on them anymore. You won't even want to, because you'll feel like that's a closed chapter in your life. And then you'll move on to the next one, because there's always more. But my point is that listening to music, that is a great way, because when you're listening to like a sad song or an angry, aggressive song and you're really vibing with it, you are associating yourself with that song. You are relating to that song. When someone hears that breakup song and they're sitting there listening to that song and they're crying, they're applying it to their own darkness, and they're acknowledging it and they're feeling it. They're bringing it to the forefront of their mind instead of keeping it trapped in the back, in the shadows. You said a great way is to also be in nature and just listen. Yes, that is a great way. The issue a lot of times with that, one of the reasons why a lot of people struggle with meditation, is because they think they're supposed to be clearing their mind of any negative thoughts, instead of realizing that if you want to integrate the shadow and if you really want to succeed in meditation, you want to go out in nature and you want to allow these thoughts to come to you and flow through you. You don't want to hold on to them. You want to be able to let them go, but you don't want to push them away. You don't want to try to ignore them, and you don't want to think of them as bad. So that's always not, and anytime I've given tips on meditation, and it's in a lot of books and videos about meditation, is to let these, whether they're positive or they're negative, let these emotions and these thoughts come and accept them, and then just let them naturally go as they go. Don't try to repress them. That's really important. But sitting in nature is not like exclusively a form of shadow work, but it can be if you're going into it with that intention. Just like listening to music is not inherently shadow work, but when you're listening to those types of songs, it can be. I feel like listening to music is a strong way to integrate the shadow. Because I was going to say, like, I've always wondered, why are people attracted to negative songs? Like, why do we love songs that make us sad? What is the evolutionary benefit to that? What is the psychological benefit to that? And I really believe that's what it is. It is us bringing those shadows to the forefront so that they're in the light and they're no longer in the shadow. And there's a deep sense of relief that you can get when you experience that. And I think we've all experienced that at some point. There's so many ways, and everyone has to find their own way. So there's other aspects of the shadow that Carl Jung talks about, and they seem to be prevalent universally across most societies. So born out of the shadow is what Jung called the anima and the animus. The anima are the feminine aspects of every man that he chooses not to acknowledge. The animus are the masculine aspects of females that they choose not to acknowledge. Because we all have what would be deemed as feminine tendencies and feminine thoughts, or we all have the potential for feminine tendencies and feminine thoughts, and every female has the potential for masculine tendencies and masculine thoughts. And generally in our society, we're taught that we're not supposed to encompass that, we're not supposed to embody that. So we usually push these things to the back. And for men, it can be their emotional approach, their empathetic approach towards things. Men feel like they have to be rigid and stern and hard and have to show less emotion. So a lot of times we push those things to the back. And similar to women, they feel like it's not feminine to be tough and to be brute and direct. Those are masculine aspects that females might feel may make them unattractive in ways, just like a man feels like acting feminine in ways might make him unattractive. What's important is to realize that there are healthy ways to integrate those things. And it's funny because what a lot of people don't realize is that a woman who's strongly in touch and who's learned to integrate her animus, or that aspect of her shadow self, those are the things that are most attractive to men, if you think about it, and vice versa. So a lot of people might disagree with this, but I feel like men, the masculine aspects of yourself, the rigid aspects of yourself, the powerful aspects of yourself, that's what makes women generally attracted to men. But on an individual basis, a girl doesn't fall in love with a man for how powerful he is. Usually, what the girl appreciates most about that man, if he is a powerful, masculine, strong, forceful man, but what the girl will appreciate most is his softer aspects, his when those moments when he does show emotion. That's what's going to draw the female and really lock her into that man, because subconsciously she's going to realize that he's integrating his shadow. And the point of integrating the shadow, and it's not like it makes you a perfect person. The point of integrating the shadow is to become whole. There is no perfection. That's fleeting and subjective. But you wanna become your whole self. As long as you're suppressing your shadow and not acknowledging it, you're only part of yourself. Men are attracted to the animus in the female when she learns to integrate it in a healthy way. And that is, like when a man sees a girl change a tire, like a lot of guys will say, oh yeah, there's something really sexy about that, like she, whatever. I don't know, or if like a girl goes hunting, like a man will love that about his lady. It's interesting to me once I really started thinking about that, and even thinking about couples that I know personally, and what are the little differences in there that separates her man from the rest of the men that she sees in him. And it's often ways that he has learned to integrate his feminine aspects, his anima. I feel like when a man suppresses his anima, the feminine aspects of his personality, and he never finds a way to integrate them in a healthy way, there will eventually be an outburst, and that might lead to some strange tendencies in males, and that may be where some of this weird trans homosexual stuff comes from. I'm not saying all of it is that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I'm sure it's just a natural, healthy, beautiful thing. But I do believe that there's times when men become confused because they've suppressed the feminine aspects of themselves for so long. Same, and vice versa. You said, I love being able to do things myself, but Taylor taught me everything. Yeah, no, I know. And there is something satisfying when a girl is able to change her own tire, and a certain sense of pride, and it makes her feel more whole, and it's healthy. Although, a man should never just watch a woman change a tire. A man should obviously always help. But you understand what I'm saying. And same with, and so for me, one way that I found to integrate the anima, the feminine aspects of my shadow, that's what writing did for me, my poetry. I realized my poetry is always coming from an emotional perspective, and I've mentioned that before. It's not the male rigid side that's responsible for this artistic poetry. That is the feminine aspects of my psyche, and just like I can bring out other aspects of my shadow when I'm writing, I can bring out the aggression and the pain. I can also bring out the empathetic notions and my emotional intelligence in general. I can bring out that fluid side, that softer side, and that's where love songs come into play and things like that. So it's a healthy way of integrating the shadow, and the shadow is not, for every man, it's not just pure aggression. It's much broader than that. I think that's really, really important to recognize. One way to identify your shadows, Carl Jung says, is to look at other people and see what bothers you the most about other people. And oftentimes that's an aspect that to be so true about yourself, that you can understand and relate to, and the reality of those things, and that's why it bothers you so much. So like for me personally, one thing I realized about my shadow self, one of the reasons I realized it is because it's something that bothered me so much when I see it in other people. I'm a people pleaser, and I've talked about that before, and that can be to my own detriment. I've always felt like, for whatever reasons in my upbringing, and I talked about that in the last session, I feel like a lot of it had to do with my family dynamics, watching different aspects of my family not get along, and me trying to be like the mediator between them. I've always wanted to be a people pleaser. It makes me happy to see people happy. But I never realized that about myself. I just think, oh, it's good to help people. It's good to make people happy. There's nothing wrong with that. Until I realized that I can be doing that to my own detriment. I can constantly be saying yes so much that I don't learn how to say no to people, because I wish I could say yes to everyone, and I wish I could help everyone, but I can't. And we all know the cup runneth over, and if the cup's not full, then there's no extra to spill out for anyone else. So I would find myself, to my own detriment, going out of my way to please people. Everybody has a shadow. You can't escape your shadow. There is no getting away from your shadow. Like I said, the only way you can escape your shadow is to not exist, or to be completely covered in darkness. And that's literally true, and also figuratively true. You can't escape your shadow, your own personal shadow. You're always going to have shadows. So, and just like physically, it's not just one shadow. There are shadows from many different angles. So, but the important thing is to learn to integrate that shadow. It's to acknowledge that you have that shadow, that shadow is a fundamental aspect of reality, and how can you acknowledge it in healthy ways instead of ignoring it? That's what shadow work is all about. And so how do you differentiate your shadows? Well, you differentiate them by how they manifest themselves. Shadows, you can't see a shadow, but there will be signs. Shadows manifest themselves in ways. And a lot of times, like I said, one of those ways is to find out what annoys you the most about other people. In what situations do you get highly and maybe even unreasonably frustrated with others? A lot of times, those are the things that you have within you that you don't acknowledge. You said, does a shadow always have to be a negative thing? No. That was my entire prerequisite here. Shadow is not inherently negative. There are negative aspects and positive aspects to everything. Literally. And that's why I made the point that our instinctual reactions to things, they exist in our shadows, our instincts, because we don't consciously acknowledge them. And that's where that fight or flight comes into play. The example is when you corner an animal and they have to choose to fight. Or even if you corner a person and you startle them, and they hit you by accident, they don't think about that. That's their shadow reacting. That is when aggression seems to come out instantaneously. Sometimes that's necessary. Especially growing up, like evolutionarily, humans, we had to have that. We needed that because there's circumstances where you don't have time to consciously think about whether or not this is the right choice. Your shadow has to take over, your instincts. Emotion and empathy, that's part of the anima in a man, generally. So those aren't bad things. But men with too much emotion, that's viewed in a negative way. So if they don't learn ways to express their emotions in healthy ways, then yes, it is a negative thing. The only reason that it's going to be pouring out in unhealthy ways is if they don't acknowledge it. That's my point earlier, is that plants need light to grow, but too much light will kill a plant, and too much light for anything is a bad thing. We need darkness. Plants need the right balance. Everything needs the right balance of light and dark. So it's not an inherently negative thing. It just is. It's a necessary fundamental aspect of reality. You said, I know what annoys me about people, but it annoys me because I'm not like them. That's right. Okay, so exactly. Okay, so for example, for me, one thing that bothers me, that I just had to think of it every day, something that just about every day comes up that bothers me. Like I said, not much really bothers me. It takes a lot to really get to me, but like I don't have road rage or nothing. What bothers me is really seriously like sports. It bothers me how much people care about professional sports. For me personally, like what irks me, it's like these people standing around for hours spouting out all these statistics about all these sports players. All of this, people say all this stuff that I talk about, a lot of people say it's just useless information. I feel like that is useless information. They know all the stats to all these players. These guys are over here playing fantasy football, and when they're not watching actual football, sitting on their couch, identifying with the team, like, oh, we really got them last night, or people identify with their team. That team doesn't care about you. That bothers me. So looking at that, so let's do this in real time, because I've never thought about this, but so Carl Jung says what bothers you about other people are often aspects or realities that you know to be true because they're within you, and you know the capacity of that. Another thing is video games. Like, these video games drive me crazy, and these grown men, older than me, of all ages that I work with, play these video games, and they talk about, Call of Duty for hours, and then like it's the coolest thing, and then it takes up so much space in their brain, it bothers me. How do these people have this time to care about? I mean, and so thinking about that from the Jungian perspective, that bothers me about people. Yes, you said, sister, you said it annoys you because you're not like them. I'm not like them at all, but I understand the capacity to be passionate about something, and I know the consequences that can come from that. And I understand that if that passion and that attention and that time and that focus and that energy was misguided, or if I put that much energy into something like sports or video games, I understand how detrimental it could be, and that's why it bothers me so much. So like for me personally, these video games that the kids play, they're amazing. Like, they're really, really cool. Some of the storylines are mind-blowing, very, very well written. The graphics are awesome. It looks cool. Like, I could sit there and play the game, and it's fun. It's cool. So, and that's what bothers me, is that I can see the appeal. And I know if I didn't have the self-discipline or the awareness, and like, I'm not trying to say I'm better than any of those people. It might come off that way, but I'm just saying that I know that if I got into those video games, I mean, I can obsess over it, because I obsess over these things. Especially what I really obsess over first and foremost is my family. If the bills are paid and the kids are fed, that is my first obsession. But next is my hobbies, my passion, my music, and my research. And that sucks me in. I know how detrimental it would be if I directed that energy towards video games. Oh, what up, Chelsea, the lion-hearted dreamer? Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I don't know what you're referring to, but maybe the sports or the video games, like, yeah. So that's why it annoys me about people, because there is a part of that in me. If I don't admit that, then I'm just lying to myself, and that's what keeps it in the shadow. I know that like I said, if I didn't have the awareness and the perspective that I have, I could get sucked into those video games for hours, for a lifetime. Chelsea, you said, yeah, the pro sports, a total no for me. I know, and that's the thing, and so that's the other thing. So besides video games, yeah, with the sports, I love sports. Sports are awesome. They're fun to play. I'm pretty athletically inclined. Like, I can get good at just about any sport if I've really dedicated myself to it. And I think sports are important, and like I said, that's a healthy way for humans to integrate the aggression that they usually put into their shadow. Sports are amazing. You can learn a lot of fundamentals from them: teamwork, self-discipline, all those things. Great, amazing. But they're primitive. And that doesn't mean that they're bad. That's not a negative thing. But let's be honest with ourselves. Everything you learn in football, I don't care how complex the strategies and the plays are, it's primitive. That is animalistic type of behavior. That's, like I said, it's not a bad thing, and it's necessary for kids to learn that, and for us to learn that structure and that self-discipline. But you don't need sports to learn that. And if you are going to use sports to learn that, that's great. But at what point do you move beyond that? Because as humans, we are capable of so much more. So it's the people who make that their entire life. Why would they do that? What a waste of a life. And then especially, the amount of money that's wasted, that's a different topic completely, but still. And then people that don't actually partake in it, especially these fat guys sitting on their couch, rooting, screaming for this team, as if that really matters. Like, whatever, that bothers me. And these guys, they know everything about these teams. They're speaking a language that I can't even speak. And it's funny, I see these guys stand in circles and they're all talking about the sports, and it's like the one guy who knows the most about the sports, he's like the man in that circle. Everyone looks at him, and not many people have much to say when the one guy who knows all the statistics steps into the conversation. All of a sudden, and the more he starts spouting off these statistics and these numbers and starts telling you facts about what happened in this game this year, and that's why this player is not going to do good this year, you could see his confidence increase and boost, and it's like, man, these guys what are they talking about and why? But I know that I can get like that with things, and I know if I directed that towards sports, maybe they don't realize the potential that's being wasted there. And maybe the reason it irks me so much, it bothers me so much, is because I know the potential for an obsessed mind state. I know that how much more we could be learning as a society. And I know that like I said, if I didn't have this perspective, I would be diving into those numbers and cross-analyzing all of that stuff like a madman, because my brain needs something to feed it. So I'm just grateful that I never wasted much time on all that. So yeah, so that's one example, sister. It's not it annoys me because I'm not like them, but I understand the capacity and the potential that being like them can have, if that makes sense. There's times when the example I used earlier, like the little girl who's taught to not question her parents, that assertiveness can be pushed back into her shadow to the point where she can get walked all over for the rest of her life. She might not know how to ask for a raise. She might not know how to speak up to her manager when they're mistreating her, or to a man when he's mistreating her, because she was always taught to be proper, prim, a lady. She needs to be ladylike. That aggression is not very ladylike. No, it's important for every lady to know when to be aggressive. That's a survival mechanism. And whether it's physical survival or just psychological survival, it's necessary. That assertiveness is necessary. Just like for men, that empathy is necessary. When you have too much of it, too much of that shadow, when it gets too dark, that's when it's negative. But it's not inherently negative. It just is. It just is. Just like literal shadows that we see around us. The darkness can be a scary thing for many, many reasons, but it's necessary. Plants need the right balance of light and darkness to be healthy. It's all about finding that balance, not leaning in any direction too far, but just finding a way to sway back and forth and not be knocked off balance by any of these things. Like, what's the other, another thing that really bothers me about people is drug addiction. Wow, like it kills me. I've never been a drug addict myself. Here I am with a blunt in my hand. But it's never been I've never been hooked on any type of hard drugs. Anyone who knows me knows that. But it bothers me so much from the Jungian perspective, I guess I understand the capacity to want to escape this reality. I can relate to that. I can feel that. I can see the potential for that in myself. I find other ways to escape. I get it. I get it. This life, this world is tough. This society, and that's why society builds our shadows. Society has geared us towards this. We're in a constant state of anxiety. I've learned how to live in the moment and appreciate the moment, but it's tough, and I think we all understand that. It's like if you're not successful financially whatsoever, like when you're poor, you have this constant anxiety of, you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You don't know if your lights are going to get shut off. And eventually you overcome that. If you overcome that, okay, so now you're paying your bills and you got enough food in the fridge, but you also know that could change any day. In this society, if you lose your job, you might be getting kicked out of your house. So that anxiety, even once you reach a certain level of success, that same anxiety is still there. It's transmutated in a slightly different form. It's not an imminent threat, but it's still a threat. And then even as you become rich, and say you're a billionaire, and everything you ever wanted is financially is taken care of, there's emotional aspects, things in your family that you can lose overnight. You can destroy relationships. So that anxiety is still there. No matter what. So the desire to transcend that it's inherent in us. We haven't learned. We're so disconnected from nature. We're so disconnected from actual freedom. And inherently, we all understand that the freedom we experience is an illusion of freedom. So that, it's constantly eating away at us. And if we don't find healthy ways to acknowledge that and healthy ways to work through that and consciously work to enjoy this moment, to live in the moment and find ways to really healthy ways to enjoy the moment, then eventually, you're just building up that shadow of anxiety and anguish. And if you don't find healthy ways to integrate it consciously, and the way you integrate the shadow, again, is awareness is key, and it all starts with awareness and acknowledgement. But again, like if you don't find healthy ways to acknowledge them, they're going to spill out. These shadows are going to grow until they start to spill out and overtake you and burst. And that's I could see someone becoming a drug addict under those circumstances. Like I understand that. If I chose to sit and dwell on it all the time, things that make me sad and anxious, I would be a mess. Because like I said earlier, that's one thing I had to learn about my shadow self, that I'm a people pleaser. And I never want to admit that. That's not like a very masculine trait as a man. You don't want to be like a people pleaser, but like it's true. And I'd like to make people happy, so I had to learn how to say no. And that was part of my shadow work. And learn to say no and not beat myself up over it, and understand that I'll always do the best I can, but not to my own detriment anymore, especially now that I got kids to take care of. But like I said, I'm a people pleaser because it hurts me to see the suffering in the world. It really does. Just to think about it, that is, especially the most with people that I know around me. It hurts me to know that anyone is suffering in any way. It kills me. I hate the thought of it. I wish I could lessen the suffering. And so if I think about that, I would be depressed every day, because let's face it, there is suffering out there. If that's all I focus on, I have to find an escape. And I could find unhealthy ways to escape that, or I could try to find healthy ways to integrate that. And that's through research collaboration, conversation, and my music and everything. And then just knowing that I will hold the door open for that person. It hurts me to witness any type of suffering, and I want everyone to feel like they have a fair shot. And so my point is that I could understand someone trying to escape that suffering and not having the discipline to do it in a slightly different reality. That could have been me, and I can see that, and I understand that. I'm aware of that. And sister, you know that too. Like, our lives, if just a few things would have went different, our lives could have been completely different. So I see the capacity and the potential in me to be a drug addict, even though I've never been one. And so drug addicts bother me so much. And what I always focus on is the fact that it's not a disease, it's a disorder. And it is a self-discipline thing. That's how you differentiate your shadows. One great way is to think about the things that upset you the most in other people, and then you'll find aspects of your own shadow often reflected in that. Doesn't mean that it's a part of you. Like I said, doesn't mean that's you. So Carl Jung talks about the collective unconscious. That's where the shadows exist. The collective unconscious, and you could see that as the darkness of space. It's everywhere. It's all around us. It just is. And when we cast a shadow, it is inherently part of that darkness in that space. It's not us. And that's why it's important to recognize that you have the shadows. Don't identify with them. That's why the word integration is always used. You don't want to embody the shadow. You don't want to learn how to entertain the shadow. You don't want to embrace the shadow. You want to integrate it. There's a difference. The people who embody the shadow, that's a psychopath. That's the 3% of the population, especially the psychopaths that can't function in society. The mass murderers. These are the people who someone pisses them off and they think about burning down the whole building, and then they actually go and do it. That's someone embodying their shadow. But you want to learn to integrate it, and find out healthy ways for you to do that. So that person who thinks about burning down the entire building, maybe he can go write an aggressive song in a creative way. Another great way might be to write something down on a piece of paper and then fold it up and burn it. That's a way to... You said, so like you asked before, is the shadow negative? Shadows are not inherently negative. The darkness, shadows are the darkness. The darkness is a scary thing, but it's not good or bad. It can be good and it can be bad. Too much of it, when it goes unacknowledged, is a bad thing. Learning healthy ways to integrate it is a good thing. So, like I said, plants need darkness. Too much light will kill a plant. Same with us. So, no, shadows are not negative, they're necessary. They could be, like I said, our instincts. There are times when you said you feel like you're a great person, you're not perfect, but I feel like I'm positive for the most part. Yeah. And like I said, and Carl Jung said it, and I don't remember his exact quote, but the point of becoming your best self is not to try to become perfect, it's to become whole. And the only way to become whole is to integrate every aspect of yourself, including what would be deemed the negative aspects. But they're only negative when they're not acknowledged, and they end up manifesting in negative ways. The young girl who is taught that she needs to be ladylike and prim and proper, she's taught to not question authority. Her parents might tell her, it's not your place to say anything, so that girl might push that, that assertiveness to the back. She might put that in her shadow. She might grow up to be a very proper young lady, but she might never learn how to be assertive. That assertiveness has become part of her shadow because she doesn't acknowledge it, But assertiveness is not an inherently negative thing. There are times in your life where assertiveness is necessary. And like I said, that young girl may grow up to get walked all over at her job. She might not know how to ask for a raise, and she might not know how to speak up to her manager when she's being mistreated at her job. Things like that. So, but too much assertiveness, and if her parents never taught her to push that assertiveness to the side, if they never taught her to be ladylike, then she might just be this violent, angry woman that's full of contempt that can't even hold a steady job because she fights with everyone in the first week. Everything needs the right balance of light and dark, physically and psychologically. Too much darkness will kill the mind, but too much light, that becomes delusion. You can't ignore the bad. You cannot ignore the pain, the anger, the anguish, the stress. You can't ignore it, because then you're living a delusion. And that's what a lot of people say to me when I try to preach positivity. They're like, oh yeah, you could just live in this dream world where everything's fucked up around you, and you just got your head in the clouds, and like your entire life could be falling apart. And that's true. You just want to find the most proactive and productive way to acknowledge the negative. You don't want to identify with your shadow. You don't want it to be a part of you. You just want to know that it exists. It is not you. It does not define you. Just like your negative thoughts don't define you, but you can't ignore them. You have to acknowledge them. Anything that's negative in your life, you can't just ignore it. This whole time I've been referring to personal shadows, but it's not all personal. There's cultural shadows also. There's ways that we deal with other people, and we deal in large groups of people, group versus group, where we have our societal shadows. Especially in large groups, when they don't learn how to integrate their shadow, that's what causes wars. That's what causes massive amounts of death and violence. I think of it like back in the schoolyard. We used to be able to go outside and have a good fight, like a fair fight, a good one-on-one. Is fighting bad? Generally, yes, but it doesn't always have to be. Fighting can be productive, and it can be... I've made some of the best friends of my life from, we fight, and then there's nothing else to do. We both gave it our all. It's over with. Why are we going to keep arguing? Now we can be best friends. There's a mutual respect you find there. But fighting can be very bad when it's not put out there and acknowledged in a healthy way. So what I noticed when we're younger, there's a lot of just like, all right, let's step outside one-on-one real quick, have a fair fight, and it's over with generally. And I've seen that with a lot of people. Most of us, we know that happens. You could do that. It's possible. And the issue is when things get said behind closed doors or across ways, and there's drama building up behind the scenes. That's the buildup of the shadow. When you got someone who does, something small, he sucker punched you and ran, or he broke your window, or, he flipped you off from over there, or he said something to your girl, or and these back and forths that start to build up the shadow, and this is what causes massive amounts of drama. Then you got someone that wants to shoot somebody real quick, didn't even get through the fist fight stage, a fair fist fight, he got jumped, and now it's become, they didn't find a healthy way to acknowledge their shadows, so it's building up, and it's going to spill over in an unhealthy way. So that's why I think there is something healthy about, like combat sports. I think boxing is great. I love MMA. I think that there's a lot that's healthy about that, and aggression is necessary. There's times when a man might need to fight, or a human being in general. So you can't ignore the fact that sometimes a punch is going to have to get thrown, or you're just going to get pushed over and walked on your whole life. And if you know how to stand your ground and you know how to throw a punch, then a lot of times you won't need to as much. You'll find that you don't even need to. But if you don't know how to, you're going to find yourself in more situations where you're going to wish you had to. I don't know if I'm making that clear, but it's like it's the build-up between large groups of people, the build-up of the shadow, the drama. A great way to look at it is like in a relationship. And anyone who's been in a long-term relationship, I know they can relate to this. When you have something about your partner that bothers you or something that is uncomfortable to talk about, it only gets worse when you don't acknowledge it, when you keep pushing it to the back. Now, it's painful. Confronting your shadow is always painful, whether you're confronting your own shadow or in a group setting like this between couples. Confronting shadows is not a comfortable thing. Stepping into the darkness, darkness represents the unknown, mystery, it's dangerous inherently for us as humans. So that's why confronting your shadow is uncomfortable. It might be really uncomfortable to bring something to your partner, to ask them about or to tell them about, but it'll only get worse the more you push it to the back. That shadow will grow. Like I said, shadows feed off of ignorance. So the more you keep pushing them back and not acknowledging them, they're feeding off of that. You said you've been with Taylor for 22 years, but we talk about everything and we never fight. Well, but you haven't always been that way, and you've seen the repercussions of not acknowledging the shadows. I'm sure you can relate to that, and you understand that with Taylor even. Yes, now you've been together so long that you're comfortable enough to share your shadows, and in a healthy way. But I'm sure when you guys were younger, there were certain things that may have went on, thoughts that you may have had, or opinions, or things that you may have did that didn't get talked about, that only grow. And then when they do spill over and manifest themselves, it's usually in an unhealthy way. I know a lot of times, just in general, I know a lot of people can relate to it. It's like, once you're arguing with someone, all of a sudden, all the opinions come out. It's like all of a sudden your partner might be saying something to you. You guys have gotten along. Now you got into your first real fight, and all of a sudden they're telling you all this horrible stuff about yourself. You got a gap in your tooth anyway, and you whatever. You're fat, and I never really. And it's like, wait, you thought all of these things this whole time, but you haven't said it. What? Why is it all spilling out now? Because you have your, they have that. You're acknowledging your aggression in this moment. It's built up over all this time, and they never found a healthy way to let it out. So it's going to spill out in an unhealthy way. Whereas maybe they could have acknowledged it. I know it's tough, but maybe they could have acknowledged it in a healthy way earlier that would be uncomfortable, but less destructive and more healthy in the end. They could have told you to start working out at the gym. You can have that conversation with your partner if you feel like they're getting overweight. You don't have to. It doesn't have to come out in an insult once you guys get in an argument. Yes, communication, exactly. And that goes for couples, that goes for relationships, that goes for friendships, but it also goes for the relationship with yourself. And that's why when you're ignoring these aspects of yourself, you're not communicating with yourself. That's where I think demons come into play. I think demons reflect the shadow aspects of our cultures throughout history. And it's funny, all the different ways that demons manifest themselves. And I talked about this in the Angels and Demons episode. How the devil or Lucifer, or the character of the devil or of demons, often manifest themselves in these stories where you find a person that's in a battle of wits with the devil. I think most of us, at least we understand the song, "The Devil Went Down to Georgia," or the age-old term, made a deal with the devil. Those stories go way, way back into our history. There's always been something about that, and it's ubiquitous across cultures. Is the overall general theme is like someone thinking that they know better than this devil or this demon, and they're going to work out a deal with this demon, and they think that they're going to be able to outsmart him, but the demon is always 2 steps ahead. I think that reflects our struggle to integrate our shadow culturally and as a society. The story of Solomon. Solomon was known as the wisest leader, and they say that Solomon summoned a bunch of demons to build his temple. You said, Lissa always talks to me about the devil and how I haven't been saved yet. Yeah, I'm not talking about that same devil. You haven't been saved yet by God, right? Yeah, none of us have. Or I mean, I guess if you're alive, you could say you've been saved by God. If you're alive and healthy, then you are being saved by God. Yeah, no, I'm talking far beyond the biblical perspective here when I'm talking about these stories that I'm talking about, and Alyssa probably wouldn't like that, but it's true. They predate the Bible. This is way, way, way beyond Christianity. Christianity is one recent lens to view it through, but it is far beyond that. You know, the concept of Lucifer, that's why I believe the concept of Lucifer and these stories are so ubiquitous, because they represent reality in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that they're literally real. Demons and devils are the personification of our shadows. But my point is, like, you know, trying to make a deal with the devil, that reflects people looking for unhealthy ways to integrate their shadows. And same thing goes with the genie. And I explained in that episode how genies are closely related to demons and devils, and people are always trying to outsmart them and outwit them, usually to their own detriment. But if you can find a healthy way to do it, like Johnny did in The Devil Went Down to Georgia, you can defeat the devil. Johnny didn't fight the devil, and he didn't try to beat the devil in a game of basketball when the devil was playing a fiddle. You know, Johnny had to play the fiddle with the devil. He had to be a better fiddle player than the devil. That was the only way to beat him. So I think that's like metaphorically, you know, you have to acknowledge your shadow. You have to integrate it. You can't ignore it. You can't do drugs to try to suppress your aggression. It'll always spill over in some other way. You know, you can't sit there doped up all the time and think that that's going to cure you of your aggression. You know, it's a very unhealthy way, and you're going to suffer from that because of that. You have to play the fiddle with the devil, you know, so you have to go hit the punching bag, go out for a run, scream, yell, say something mean. You know, that's why I did it with my music. Like, that's how I integrated the aggressive parts of my shadow. I made a lot of violent music, and we all understand, and I think most people would agree, there's a lot of negative, inherently negative music that's beautiful and powerful. And I like a lot of aggressive music. I really do. Why? I'm not an aggressive person. You know, but it's a way for me to integrate my shadow, is to relate to that aggression. Ryan, you said Old Angry DK was great. Yo, man. Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, and it's what made me who I am. You know, I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't go through those phases. And thankfully, I've survived through it enough, with enough guidance or luck or self-discipline, whatever, or combination of those things. I was able to make it through it. But a lot of people, you know, they don't. If they don't find healthy ways to integrate that shadow, that aggression, a lot of times it can stop them short. You know, it can spill over, that shadow can burst, and like I said, the only way to get rid of your personal shadow is to either be in complete darkness or to not exist. And a lot of people don't make it long enough to learn how to integrate their shadow. You know, but you can't get rid of it. You have to integrate it. You have to play the fiddle, you know. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Like I said, it's not, you can't do some ritual overnight and be cured of your shadow. It's a constant process that we're all going to go through. I remember when I started learning about this and applying some of these principles, I felt like a new person. I felt renewed. I felt like I had a new understanding of myself, and I felt more whole as a human being. But I realized pretty quickly that there were still areas I needed to work on, as there always will be. And it's a constant process, but it really brings a sense of clarity and awareness and comfort once you start to recognize. And honestly, it's empowering. It is. Even thinking about that, like the fact that, man, I could have been a drug addict. You know, like that. I'm so grateful that I didn't fall for that, and I didn't roll down that hill. But like, so it's empowering for me to realize that, instead of saying like, oh, that wasn't possible, I would never ever be that would never be me. Let's be real. A lot of people are put in a lot of different situations, and you never know. That's something I still struggle with, is wanting my kids to be whole, integrated, grateful, disciplined in healthy ways, because I know struggle builds character. I know my struggle has helped build my character. But we don't want our kids to experience the same struggles as us. But my struggles have made me resilient. And that's something I'm still working on every day, trying to find ways to build that resilience in my children without them having to go through the same tribulations. But like, you haven't lost touch, and that's hard for anybody. We all know some of us didn't have much. Right. And man, I could never, like, I don't care what happens, man. I can never forget where I came from. So if our kids experience our same struggle, there would be no point, right? Exactly. Where's the growth? Where is the growth? True, but then like, it bothers me because I see things, and it's like, like when my son complains about his dinner, and like, it's a good dinner, and it's like, man, like you don't even understand some of the things I had to grow up with, like, or when my kids tell me they're bored, like, boredom is an insult to your own intelligence. I always said that to myself, and I was in a trailer in the middle of the woods with no video games many times, and how can you be bored, man? Like, Hamburger Helper comes to mind. Yeah, no, seriously. Like, these kids have no clue how good they have it. And sometimes I'm like, man, he needs to feel some of that struggle. Maybe he can really appreciate this and be grateful for it. But instead, I try to find healthy ways to make him acknowledge that. So I talk to him about it, and I explain it to him, and I try to add a lot of descriptive details to kind of pull him into that, to almost let him get a glimpse of what that feeling is like, of what real struggle is. Maybe I don't always do it in the best way. Sometimes I just get pissed, and I'm like, there's children starving, sleeping on a cold dirt floor every night. Like, I hit him with that one once in a while, and it's like, and you want to complain about because we don't have chocolate, we only have vanilla for your dessert? Like, what are you talking about, man? Let him see your old shadow. Exactly what I was getting at. Right. So, exactly, man. That's something I struggle with, and I'm still trying to find ways to work through with them. Right. Let him see my old shadow. Exactly. But not all of it, because I can't. That's a big shadow, and then he would be covered in darkness, and I can't do that. Can't let him get engulfed in complete darkness. But yeah, give him little. I shut the lights off real quick on him. Just give him a glimpse of that shadow, just to see what it feels like for a minute, and put him in my shoes for a while. Yeah, man, and I hope I hope it helps. And I hope over time he will grow to appreciate that and understand that. And hopefully he can have a healthy understanding of the struggle without having to experience the detriment of it so much. Tough though. I mean, how do you make someone appreciate something as much if they've never had to go without it? I don't know. I'm working on that. I'm trying. Because I want them to be resilient. I want them to be strong. And we all know easy times make weak men. Weak men make hard times. And hard times make strong men. And strong men make easy times. But then easy times make weak men. And that's a constant cycle. And I really believe there's a lot of truth to that. So I don't want these easy times to make my kids weak. So, and again, that's why I'm trying to find healthy ways for them, and that's why they do the sports, and I do, they have their chores, and I sometimes I put them to work. I have my son out there sawing a bunch of, actually I have both of my sons out there sawing through a bunch of styrofoam. The other homeowner left here, and I had to cut it up and put it in bags and get it in the dumpster. And I gave them the big hand saw. And there was a lot of thick styrofoam from like an old dock, and I wanted them to cut it up, and I did a couple pieces for them real quick. And of course, like to them, it's like I made it look easy. So I cut 2 pieces, and I'm like, you see, it's that quick, it's that easy, get it done. And they're over there just sawing away, and I'm in the process, I'm teaching them how to use the saw and hold it right, let the tool do the work. You don't want to push too much, you want to let it glide and all that, keep it straight, all that. But after that, I sat down. I gave them all the best explanations. I showed them multiple times, the right angles, how to hold it, what I would do. I had to get up a few times, but then I finally sat down, and I'm like, they're going to cut through the rest of that styrofoam. And I'm not helping them. And they're not getting any more tips from me. And it took a while, and then I see them over there sweating. And it's like, they struggled, but they did it. And I don't feel bad. And even when like my girl, she's like, cause Elijah, the younger boy, he was out there, he couldn't get that last piece. And he's just taking forever. And she's like, oh, he's sweating and he's really hot. And you could tell he was kind of upset. Like he might have even been like on the verge of crying just because I was asking him to do this. It's not like I wouldn't have done it myself. Like, I'm not making them do all the work. It's that like, that's not even that hard. And that's something that they can handle. Let them do it. And I just kept, every time he was over there and he would stop with the saw, I used to be like, man, when I was your age, my dad had me cutting through oak wood by hand, and like I might find some exaggeration there, but no, like my dad had me on the construction site. You think cutting through some styrofoam is tough. Like that's like butter, man. So I didn't feel bad. My kids are amazing because of me. Thank you. Ryan, you said we are 100% in a generation change where things are so easy to access. I'm not sure how it's going to play out for a lot of kids, right? I agree, man. I agree 100%. It's weird. But that's okay. You got to break down to build. They're boys, right? Seriously, man. Yeah, I'm not sure how it's gonna play out either. Sister, you said dad put me through shit way worse than that. Right. These kids don't even understand. And I don't look back at it like what dad put me through is so horrible. I never viewed it like that. I've looked at it like, hey, this is regular. You're a man. You got to be able to work hard. Until I like grew up and got out in the real world and realized that most of these guys, they're not men like that, and they don't look at it that way. Even like in my job, every day I see it. There's very few people that are actually good workers. Now we do have some, but like the vast majority of people, they don't even know what hard work is. They've been so cushioned by this corporate job for so long. They don't understand what it could be like on a job site. And when people tell me that their manager's mean, and I mean at this point I know all the managers there, so when I hear that, I'm like, there are no mean managers. Even the ones that people would consider mean, that's light work compared to a construction crew of old school carpenters that are all, Marines and like that. These managers have to be politically correct. They can't say, like, none of them are that mean, Brian, you said back to basics. What do you feel is the best way to start a relationship with your own shadow? I don't know if that's the right question to ask. It's a good question. You can't escape the relationship with your shadow. You've been a pipe fitter / plumber for a while after Walmart. Those woke managers don't stand a chance, right though? You're exactly. It's so weird to me being in such a corporate environment, such a cushioned corporate environment. Like, we're guaranteed breaks. Like, we have mandatory breaks. Like, if I don't take my break and one of the managers find out, they're like, come on, Dan, like, you gotta go. If I tell my manager, oh, I skipped my break, they're like, well, you can't tell me that. They're like, you gotta go. You have to go take your break. And I'm like, really? I got all this stuff to do. You don't want me to get that stuff done? They're like, yes, of course they want me to get it done, but like, legally, they have to give me my break. I come from jobs where you don't get a break until the job's done. And by the time the job's done, you're just going to want to go home. So like, or if you want to take a break, you ain't getting paid for that day, man, because we're all, whatever, like, people just, he said, okay, so accepting and building a relationship with your shadow, maybe not starting. Yeah, honestly, like the word that Jung used, and that's why I've been using it, is integrating the shadow. I think that's the most accurate. That's the best way to describe it. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to be affecting you, whether you realize it or not. So, you can look at it like a relationship with another person. Like, they could be living in your house. You might be sharing bills with them and stuff, but sure, you can like ignore them and not acknowledge them, but they're still going to be there. If you're married to someone, you can ignore them all you want. You still have a relationship with them. You guys might choose to sleep in separate bedrooms or whatnot, but your energy is affecting each other no matter what. So same with your shadow. You're always in a relationship with it, but the more you ignore it, just like if you ignore your husband or your wife in that relationship, it's going to build in a negative way until it eventually spills over. So you said you've seen things about acknowledging your own shadow before you fall asleep, comparing them to someone. Yeah, there's so many ways, man, and there's, like I said, there's no one size fits all, and it's all very nuanced and subjective and depends on the individual circumstance. And that's why like the best I could do is like maybe give examples. And Carl Jung said the best way to start acknowledging your shadow, or to start to build, I would say, to build a healthier relationship with your shadow, because you're always in a relationship with it, and if you're ignoring it, then it's a bad relationship. So the way to start building a healthy relationship is just to acknowledge it. It really starts with acknowledgement and acceptance. An acceptance that it's real, that it's true. Just like Carl Jung said with dreams, the best way to start to understand your dreams is to, instead of thinking that they're just random feedback from your brain at night is acknowledge that they do exist. Whatever, you don't even have to understand what they are fundamentally, or you don't have to worry about what they are fundamentally, but just realize they're there and they exist for what they are. It's something you experience. It exists in that sense, at least. So acknowledging your shadow, acknowledging that it exists and the potential of it to become dark is always there. You know, a lot of people, I think the biggest struggle they have with the darker aspects of their self is not wanting to accept it. Acceptance is the first step. That is the best way, universally, to start to integrate your shadow and acknowledge it in a healthy way, is to just accept it and realize that it's real. And yeah, like you said, before you fall asleep, honestly, doing anything before you fall asleep, like, it is a great way to lock things into your brain or into your mind in a lot of different ways. And like you said, comparing them to someone, there's different ways you can compare them to someone. I'm not sure. Like I said earlier, one way to recognize your shadow and to identify that, and my sister asked earlier, what are ways you can distinguish your shadows, and that is to look at other people. And that's why I was talking about to find what annoys you the most, what makes you the most angry when you see other people do it, or things about other people that really bother you. Try to find ways that you can see that in yourself, and a lot of times you'll find and you'll identify your own shadows through that. And it doesn't have to be something that you identify with in your persona. Like I said, I've never been a drug addict, but thinking about drug addicts, I could see the capacity for that in me. Acknowledging your shadow before you fall asleep, doing any type of internal work before you fall asleep is powerful for lots and lots of reasons in a lot of different ways, especially shadow work, psychologically, symbolically, even neurologically. There's a lot of reasons why it helps so much. As far as like the epinephrine is concerned, honestly, that could probably be its own episode. I probably should do an episode about that. Just mental practices before sleep, because they're very powerful. And I have talked about actually a lot of the ones I've done in these dream sessions before, but maybe I should put all of that into one full session, because there's a lot to be said about that. But it's definitely powerful to practice any type of internal psychological or spiritual or metaphysical practices. It's good to do them before you go to sleep. I mean, there's so many reasons why. Not only because you're in a more free flow state at that point, but also because you can lock that frequency in for when you fall asleep, and you can keep building that energy throughout the night. That's a whole nother. Sister, you said do a session on practice before sleep. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Not now, so let me not get too much into that. Let me actually, I'll add that into my, because I have a whole bunch of a whole document here of topics and stuff for dream sessions. So let me just add that in there. You said adding to Carly about inviting your shadow to talk to you about what it may want / need in your dreams. Yeah, inviting, that's okay. I mean, shadow work in dreams is a whole nother thing, but yeah. Not only can you invite it, and a lot of times that would take like intention and maybe even potentially lucid dreaming, but besides that, you can go through your dreams and find out. That's why it's so important to write dreams down. But even if you don't have them written down, you could think back over whatever dreams you can remember, and try to identify some of these characters and see which ones may have been your shadow self manifesting in your dreams. Because different archetypes, every archetype can arise from the shadow, has the potential to rise, and has a shadow side to it. And I have that video about the archetypes I'm going to be putting up. That was the third one in the Carl Jung series. But yeah, you can set the intention to dream and have this conversation with your shadow. That's a great point. But you can also just look back over your dreams and try to see what your shadow may have been telling you. And after you realize what components make up the shadow self, you can look for which characters may have been personified in your dreams in that way. Okay, sister, I love you so much. Yeah, you go dream. I get it. What time is it? 11:14. Yeah. Brian, you said that's a crazy thought. Between it being me or my shadow self dreaming, that changes quite a bit of what my dreams have been about, right though? Yeah, that could entirely change the perspective of it. And it's not just your shadow self, man. Having conversations with different aspects of your personality in your dreams, that's powerful. I actually there's a lot to say about that. I've had some interesting ones, but yeah, and we've talked about that, and I've asked that question before, and I don't know if it's entirely true, but I do think a lot of times it applies, and it is true that characters in our dreams represent different aspects of our personalities, manifesting themselves, personified literally in our dreams, but they're all different aspects of our own personality. This live is going to help you question/change a bit of perspective for sure. Thank you, man. Me too, honestly. That's why I enjoy these live sessions, and I appreciate all the feedback. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's that's a different lens that you can view your dreams through, and I think it can be healthy and really productive. And I learned a lot once I started looking at them in that way, looking for the archetypes and the shadows in the characters. Yeah, man, it's powerful. It really is. It's beautiful. You said, I've realized even just tonight that the old demons still need to be seen/heard and not buried underneath. Yeah, man. Right. And that's tough because we're kind of conditioned to expel demons, to cast them out, cast them away into the pit of darkness. Mythologically and just like metaphorically here, demons play a fundamental role. We can't forget that the devil originally wasn't bad. He was there to punish humans for doing wrong things. The devil was doing God's work, and I'm speaking metaphorically here, obviously, but that's why I think the stories are so interesting. The devil played a necessary role, and a lot of times the demons did too. Demons, and that's why the Greek word for demon, it just meant a spirit. It could be good or it could be bad, depending on the context and how it was used. Like I said, Solomon supposedly used the demons to build his temple. You said anger helps push for change and helps people realize the need or want for better. Yeah, dude, yes, exactly. Anger is a necessary emotion. Aggression is a necessary force that's fueled so much amazing music, and it's also necessary. We can't be too complacent. Without any anger, there would be too much complacency. There would be no motivating force for change. Or I can't say there would be no more motivating force for change, but there would be much less motivating force for change. As long as that anger is not ignored, or as long as you don't completely let that anger engulf you, it can be used in healthy ways. Anger has fueled a lot of positive change. our anger towards injustice and things like that. We won't stand for it. Sometimes you have to be angry about things to make a difference about them, to really compel people to make major changes. Sometimes it takes that extra aggression. The worst saying in life is, "It is what it is." Complacency is the problem with our current society, big time. Big time, man. We've become so cushioned, so comfortable, that we feel any form of discomfort has to be abolished. We think that we have some sort of entitlement in this society, that it's unfair to feel any discomfort. No, discomfort's necessary for growth. Otherwise, you have no reason to grow. You'll have no motivation. It's like we've found ways to always negate any type of discomfort to our own detriment at this point. And that's when we're really, and then when you choose to negate or to dodge any type of discomfort for too long, eventually that's going to manifest itself in a much more debilitating or negative way. But yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. Definitely. Yeah, man, when you stop by, whatever, man, I'm down for all of it. It's conversation. Even, that's another, you asked, like, what's the best way to start acknowledging your shadow or whatever? Conversation, just healthy conversation with other human beings is just a great way to acknowledge these shadows and to integrate them. And I just dropped that first Carl Jung video on YouTube. I'm going to be sharing that for a while. I'll be sharing reels from that. But this one will be the next video that I edit and put up the fully edited version of. Yeah, man, I'm happy you stopped by too. Thank you as always. I appreciate it. And Dee, I know you're gonna watch this, so peace and love from the past to the future you. And anyone who watches this to the end, I appreciate all you people. Ryan, you are the man. Thank you. You made this session. And my sister, I know you're gone, but I love you, and I hope you have a good night, all of you. Much peace and love. Until next week.